Each week, we're going to be looking at a particular news topic, digging down deep, asking experts questions about it and discussing it round this table. And this week, we're going to be looking at Ukraine and asking this question: who has the strategic edge? My name is Alex Forrest-Whiting.
And my name is Marcel Nadim Abourakir, and this show is a bit more than just the two of us. It's very much about you guys. So we want you to question us in the chat. We want you to have comments in there because you will fundamentally shape, I think, where the show goes. This might go for an hour, let's say. But this might also go for 2 hours if you have amazing questions for our experts that we have on in, let's say, 15 minutes or so. So to get you all warmed up, it's a premiere show. I want to ask you a question, you guys in the chat, and you just answer right away, right? The question is, are you staying up to date with all that's been happening in Ukraine in the recent months?
Which is a good question, because I have to say that since the 24th of February, when Russia invaded Ukraine, a huge amount has happened. We're now in the 5th month, and even for us as journalists, I have to say it is sometimes hard to keep up to date with what's coming on, who's considered to be in front, who isn't. So we will be looking at that issue as well. If you're just joining us, hello. Welcome to News Desk. We are a brand new show here on YouTube, and we're going to be looking at different topics each week, digging in deep, asking some serious questions. And this week we're looking at Ukraine. And we're going to be sort of breaking it down into various topics. Firstly, we'll be looking at the military aspect and asking, what's going on militarily? Because if you remember, there was a lot of surprise at the beginning about just how well Ukraine seemed to be faring against that Russian aggression. Many people had been expecting Russia just to walk in and for Ukraine to surrender. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, some people have said that Ukraine won the short war, but clearly we're not in a short war. We're now in a long war. So we'll be looking at what is going on, with particularly in the east of the country, with Russia certainly trying very hard to take the Donbass region. We'll be speaking to a military expert about that. And also we'll be looking at things like heavy weapons. Are they getting to Ukraine quickly enough? We know that some countries like the US, the UK, got those weapons in there quickly, and others, perhaps like Germany, have taken a little bit longer. So we'll be looking at those questions and putting them to our experts. So that's one of our topics.
Others not so much, you wanted to say, right? Germany definitely one of them. I think the war on the ground is one of the facets that we're going to look at. Another one is the PR war that's been going on. Videos on YouTube, videos on TikTok, Telegram, TikTok, so many. It's an overflood of information. Some part of it is propaganda, some part is even misinformation, and it's really hard to believe. Who do you actually believe? Like, what's a good source? What's a video that you maybe shouldn't just like, and you shouldn't just comment, and you shouldn't just share it? And I've had a try. I had a try at getting some light into this fog. I've prepared some videos. And we're going to look at them and see whether you guys can find the fakes or find the real ones. And then afterwards, as journalists, we'll have a best try at formulating maybe 3 tips on how to behave on social media when it comes to misinformation and propaganda.
Yeah, I must just say that Marcel was originally going to just give me those videos and try and, I think, humiliate me on air. And I said, no, we're not going to play that game. But anyway, if you're just joining us, we're called News Desk. And hello, welcome. It's a brand new show. We're looking at a specific topic each week, and this week we're talking about Ukraine, and we're going to have experts on looking at issues of military, also, as Marcel was telling us, propaganda. We're also going to have an expert who's going to be talking about the importance of emotions in war and in international politics, which I have to say I'm fascinated to hear more about, and also questioning whether perhaps we have, or the West, other countries may be experiencing war fatigue. This has been going on for 5 months. How much longer will it last? So we will be unpacking some of those topics, and hopefully you'll be putting lots of questions in the chat. Great to see so many people joining, Marcel.
Already really active. I'm glad, because that was a big concern to some degree. I'm quite glad that it's not just the two of us, because we have a great team here in the studio. One of them is Michaela Kavanagh. She's responsible for all data, statistics, big maps. So we'll get back to you in a second. Another person is Jonas. He's our tech guy. So if anything goes wrong,
blame
Jonas
him.
will save us. And then there's Dustin. Dustin, how do I phrase his term? Like
I think we call him the boss, the big man, the man who makes the decisions.
I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that, but someone needs to make sure you guys are at work on time. So, yeah.
And also we will have another special guest who'll be joining us in a moment to also give us some insights that he has as well. But before that, we did have a video, something that we thought was quite cool, and we wanted to show you all that Dustin, the boss, the main man, is going to talk about and show us and explain why you thought that this would be of interest to everyone watching.
Yes, I will. Actually, Michaela, our researcher, has to share her screen with the video on it, because for technical reasons, we're not able to have all these laptops share their screens, but I think that will probably work. So the video I want to show you is, you might have seen it already. It's about the Bayraktar. It's the Bayraktar drone. Are we seeing it now? Wait. Okay.
It's a premiere show, guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Something will go wrong, and we have to deal with that. It's about the Bayraktar drones. Those are drones that the Ukrainian military is using, Turkish drones that the Ukrainian military is using, and also getting from Turkey against Russian tanks, against basically all kinds of Russian vehicle soldiers in the war that they are fighting. And the video is kind of a Ukrainian propaganda song. It was actually composed by a Ukrainian propaganda artist who joined the Ukrainian military to produce, songs to keep morale high and to fight the Russians in a propaganda war. And the song, it shows. Basically, it mocks Putin, and then at one point you will hear the words Bayraktar, and that's the name of the drone. And maybe we can listen in.
Do we have a screen?
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
And as you can hear from the applause going there, that's kind of what the joke of the song. I think we can spare you to watch the rest. The joke of the song is always like, you will see some Russian soldiers like in some footage, and then someone will scream Bayraktar, and you can see a supposedly Russian vehicle explode, something like that. And I just thought it is an interesting video because it shows how deeply the war in Ukraine is like dependent from from Western weapons, like how deep this dependence is. And it's so deep that people are like composing songs about this, right? Like there's T-shirts with the drones on them, and basically it's kind of like there's a new folklore almost developing. And people are sharing these videos to just show how they support Ukraine. And I find it, I just thought it interesting.
Yeah, and also that even when Ukraine won the Eurovision Song Contest, the band that won sold their trophy so that they could also raise money for the army and to buy.
Exactly, Bayraktar drones. Like the trophy of the band at the Eurovision Song Contest was actually sold to buy Bayraktar drones. Yeah. The whole deal didn't exactly work out like they imagined, but that's just it's a good example of how important these weapons are for the war that's going on in Ukraine. Actually,
yeah, great, and we'll certainly be talking about that in a bit more depth with our military expert when we speak to him. If you are joining us, hello. We are called News Desk. We're a news show. We are looking at a topic in depth, and this week we're talking about Ukraine, and we are asking who has the strategic edge. And thank you so much for joining us, because we're getting lots and lots of messages.
Many comments.
Marcel will...
It's overwhelming almost. There's a lot of comments coming in. Some of them we'll just throw a bit back, because we have some really great experts coming on who can answer these questions way better than we could ever try. So shout out to Paolo, shout out to Glenn, and then shout out to Ty. I've noted down your questions. I will ask them later on, but I see you guys in the chat. So if your question is not right away answered, bear with me for a second. But it's nice to see the communities there.
It's nice
they
to
want to be
feel
involved.
Exactly, and we're not alone. But now I think is a good time to bring in our special guest.
Yes.
We almost need a little sort of a drum roll.
That's a chance for the chat. Clapping emojis in the chat, if you have any on hand.
We have a very lovely person who's about to walk in. He is DW's political correspondent, and he has been... Do come in, Benjamin. I've been practicing how to pronounce your name correctly. Forgive my poor Spanish. Benjamin Alvarez Gruber. Is that correct?
Alvarez. Yeah,
Alvarez.
but almost great.
Almost.
So close.
Oh. Anyway, thank you very much, and for taking pity on me. As I said, you've been covering Ukraine, the war, since the beginning. Obviously, the political dimensions, also the international geopolitical dimensions. And you went to the G7, didn't you, at the end of June, covered that. And I think there might be a question already about that.
Yes, the community has been so active. They asked before the show started already. They maybe knew that he was coming on, following his Twitter. The question is from Davis Palabs, and he's basically asking, how far is the West willing to go, both financially and militarily? Was that something that's been discussed at the G7?
Totally, and they tried to find a unified voice saying that they will support Ukraine. In the statement, it says, we will continue to provide financial, humanitarian, military and diplomatic support and stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. But how long is that? And that's the big question. Do you have unity? Do you have all of them on a side saying we will continue supplying heavy weapons, continue with financial support? Or will there be a time where they say, you know, we have to look for our population here as well?
Yeah, when people are complaining about things like gas prices going up, food prices going up, it's a question, isn't it? How long is long?
Of course, and the solidarity might also fade when you see what the consequences are. I'm sure we'll talk about gas, about energy prices, with people saying, you know, what does it mean for me, this consequence, it's the sanctions for Russia, with many officials saying that the sanctions should not be harder for the people living here, but for the people that should be sanctioned, or for the government there.
Yeah, it's really hard to predict. I think that's something that we're going to discuss later on, but it's really difficult because depending on who you ask, there's a different answer, right?
Yeah.
Some of them say, depending on when the heavy weapons are delivered, that's going to decide when the war goes. Some others say, well, even when these are delivered, it's still going to go on for decades. And I think a huge part of it is also, which we're going to get into with our emotions author who wrote about emotions in war, is how long are willing to take the pain, right? How long are willing, in the West, people willing to kind of go with what their government wants to do. And, you know, people are feeling it now already, but it's still livable, I would say.
And not to force the Ukrainians into something that they don't want.
Yeah.
That's something that many fear when we look at the Minsk agreements with Russia, with Ukraine, with Germany, with France, saying them, you know, go to the table, go to the negotiation table now.
And we have to explain that those were agreed before this war. That all dates back to 2014, doesn't it? After that, when Crimea was annexed by Russia. Just to explain, if people are wondering what the Minsk agreements are, it's a good point. And I think at this point it would be great if we could actually speak to a Ukrainian rather than us talking about them. So I think hopefully we have got Maria.
I don't think she's ready yet.
Oh, is she not with us yet?
Yeah.
Oh,
she needs a minute.
She needs a minute. Okay, well, we won't talk to her, but we will be talking to Maria, and she will be telling us about how she has been living her life, how she's had to move around Ukraine, and you know what the effects it's been having on not just on her but also on her family. So we'll talk to her in a moment. But on that issue, then we can talk about just what we have seen here in Berlin, because it was quite extraordinary at the beginning, wasn't it? Back in February when this invasion happened, and suddenly there were trainloads and trainloads of refugees and people arriving in Berlin, obviously Poland, other countries, but for those of us in Berlin, it was quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
The majority of those who made it to Germany via Poland came to Berlin, and then they were moved to other cities. Of course, it's different to the refugee situation in 2015. Many people compare it, but it's a different status, because if you're part of the Schengen place already, you can move for 90 days. So but of course, you see the consequences directly. And now also when it comes to heating prices, when it comes to having a war right in Europe, right next to it. When you ask Poland, when you ask the Baltic states,
Yeah.
many of them see the aggressor nearby. Many are asking the question, how far will Putin go? Where will he end? And then it's a fear also. And then when we go to the whole of this defense alliance of NATO, of Finland, of Sweden joining, it's a fear that they have, saying, this is only one part. We had Crimea, we had Georgia. When will Putin stop? And that's the big fear that many have.
Yeah, that's also one of the questions that's been asked many times in the chat. Over 2,000 people are watching us at the same time. So thank you guys for joining here.
Thank you.
This is News Desk, a news show that we have here on DW News. We'll pick out one topic that you guys are caring about every single week, always. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. I will be here next week as well. Today
8 p.m., but you have to say Central European time.
So if you are in New York, that's 2 p.m. If you are in Los Angeles, that's 11 p.m.
He's been learning his times.
I wrote those down last week to get them down. So if you are in New York, shout out now. I hope to see you in the chat. And today we're talking about Ukraine and who has the strategic edge. We're covering it from several different aspects, one of them being the military standpoint, a second one being the PR war that's been going on around the world, really. And the third one is about war fatigue and emotions in war. So very, very interesting things coming up now. But I've just heard that we have our guests ready.
We have Maria. Maria, hopefully you can see us here in Berlin. Hi, I can see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Maria Siroshenko. First of all, I just love to hear the story of how you because I know you're from Mariupol, but you're now in Kyiv. Just tell us how that's happened and what's happened to you over the past few months.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm originally from Mariupol. It's my hometown. My whole family lived there for my whole life. And I last visited Mariupol just a month before the war started.
Oh, I don't think we've got a very good connection at the moment. Do you think we'll be able to come back to that? Do we need to?
Second, when we had a technical test earlier, and I think during that there was no issue. So I think she might be coming up any second. Coming back any second. I have her WhatsApp, so she will let me know if
WhatsApp her. Actually, I think it's very important for us to address this also. I think one thing when it comes to wars specifically, and also talk shows in media, oftentimes it's talked about as this abstract thing, and it's just this mass of people going from one place to another. But it's much more interesting to really get into the personal stories and to what people have been going through, talking to people that have been suffering, so Ukrainians. That's why I'm already really intrigued to hear what she's saying now. Do you have maybe one question already that you really want to ask Maria coming up then?
She's ready. She's back. Is she back?
Is she back?
Are you back, Maria? Hopefully. Yes. Hi. We lost you. You're back. Are you back?
No, she's frozen.
Oh, she's frozen. What a shame.
Keeps switching between being frozen
that's
in
a
the
shame.
picture.
I did have a good chat with her actually this morning, and she was telling us about her that she'd left Mariupol in January and had moved to Kyiv. And then the war broke out on the 24th of February. And within a few days, because of what was going on in Kyiv and the attacks on the capital, she and her boyfriend had then moved to Lviv, which is also on just southwest of the capital. And she'd stayed there for 2.5 months and then had moved back into Kyiv, but she had left her family behind. So she said that I'm sorry I'm having to tell you this story, but she said that her parents happened to be on holiday in Spain just a week before the war broke out. So they were stuck in Spain. Luckily, though, still in Spain. So they're refugees in Spain, have not been able to come back. And then meanwhile, her grandmother was still in Mariupol. And then after a few weeks, because remember, Mariupol was besieged by Russian shelling, they were able to get her out. And
her parents went from being on holiday to being refugees, directly, basically.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Being helped by the Red Cross there.
Wow.
And her grandmother, they managed to to get her out of Mariupol, and she's now living. We might even have a photo. Maybe we can show the photo. She's now living in the Kyiv region, so not with Maria, but close by, and. I said to her, one of the reasons I said to her, are you not tempted to leave? And so that was her at Christmas. She was with her family. So those are her parents and I think her sister. And then I think we've got another photo of her with her grandmother. Maybe we can find it in a moment. Anyway, but one of the, she works in tech, and I think she got offered to move to Poland. And she turned it down, said, no, I want to stay here. I feel I've got to stay here. Part of the reason was to make sure that she was close to her grandmother.
Imagine that.
I know.
Sorry, she just messaged me saying she changed the network. Maybe the new network will work. We'll keep an eye out and see.
It'd be great to speak to her.
I can see on Jonas' screen over there the frozen picture. Once I see it moving, I'll tell you guys. And then
we're trying to have a secured connection to someone who's literally in the midst of a war. So bear with us here. It's not as easy. What I think is really remarkable about that is one that. She also never really found refuge specifically with somewhere, right? She went to Kyiv, stayed there for a bit. Then she kind of felt like there's more coming, as I think many, especially in the beginning, did. Like that, I thought that Russians gonna run over Ukraine, right? So she went to Lviv, and then in the midst of these 5 months, it kind of shifted again, right? It went back into a bit of there's some sense of not normality. That would be too much, but there's some sense of. Okay, we can go back to Kyiv and live there. It's a livable city. But then again, 2-3 weeks ago, again, Russian shelling on Kyiv, right? So it's you never really know where this war goes. And this is specifically why we have someone on in a bit who will explain us how exactly that works. Because definitely for me, I'm an amateur when it comes to that. I have no idea how war works. And I'll ask him the most simple questions.
Yeah,
and I'm excited.
Like how do you
don't always get to talk to these kind of people.
If we can get her back.
Actually, now we have our military expert online and Maria are both ready now.
Well, should we just try and go back to Maria?
Yeah, let's try to go back to Maria
just quickly. If we can see her, because Maria, hello. You're back.
Hello. I'm really sorry for the bad connection.
It's not your fault. As we were just saying, you are in a war zone, so bad connection is the least of our problems. I was actually just telling the story about how you had left Mariupol in January before the war broke out. You'd moved to Kyiv, to the capital. Then war broke out, and within a few.
I think she's frozen again. I think she's frozen again. I think we can give up on this.
I think we'll have to give up.
On.
Well,
otherwise the chat might kill us.
It might.
We show the frozen
we don't want you to leave.
I'll use that little pause here for a second, because we did ask the chat before the show started, when will the war in Ukraine end? And the options were this year, in the next years, the next decade, or this decade, it will never be fully resolved. Ben, this year, the next years, this decade, or it would never be fully resolved?
If the Western countries knew how long this war would take, it would be far easier for them to take the decisions of how many weapons we have to send. Will they be able to hold the lines? And then I'm sure we'll talk about that later on when we have the president saying Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, saying we have this counteroffensive, to regain these towns. You have the Russian president saying the war is barely starting now. So those are signs that they are sending not only to the population, but also to the Western countries when it comes to weapons deliveries. And if they knew how long this war would take, I'm sure they would take other decisions as well.
Certainly many people in the chat agree. They say to 33% that this year this war will be over, 28% in the next years, and some say this decade, but 30% even say it will never be fully resolved. Imagine
wow.
that.
That is a high number.
Right?
Yeah, that is. Well, I think this is a good chance now. Hello, by the way, if you're just joining us, we are called News Desk. We're a new show here on YouTube from DW News, and we are each week looking at a particular topic. And this week we're talking about Ukraine and asking who has the strategic edge. We had been hoping, we slightly spoke to a woman who is from Ukraine, currently living in the capital, Kyiv, but unfortunately the connection was not very good. So we haven't been able to ask her, but hopefully our second guest, third guest. You were our first guest, Ben. Ben, you're still here. But hopefully our next guest will be here and we can talk to him. His name is Frank Ledwidge, and he is a military strategist. And this is particularly interesting. We think this is particularly interesting. A former military intelligence officer who is now in Kyiv. And I'm hoping very much, Frank, that yes, you're there. Fantastic. Hello, Frank. Very
Hi,
good
Alex.
to see you. Great to see you. So my first question is, what exactly are you doing in Kyiv?
I'm a visiting fellow at a think tank here called the Transatlantic Dialogue Centre. And I'm essentially continuing what I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 months at my university, which is Portsmouth University in the UK, which is studying the war in Ukraine. I mean, it's not quite on there in Kiev. This is a very safe and, as was said before, I think Ben said, it's a very livable city. It's a nice place to be, but it's a bit. You have that sense that very much of a city in conflict. Perhaps like you can see it in the streets. They're a little bit more empty than usual, and of course, every so often we get the air irons as well, which is mostly ignored. But it's very much a city at war, if not directly in conflict.
Yeah, so a bit of a roller coaster then, living there. I guess trying to live life normally, but at the same time knowing this is absolutely not the normal.
No, and I speak every day to people from Kiev who from elsewhere, like Maria was, who've come in essentially as internally displaced. And their experiences are always fascinating, their attitudes as well to the war. Usually astonishingly determined. And of course, Kievans themselves who fought through the battles in the earliest month of the war. And they recall, of course, being in the shelters, hearing the explosions and waiting for the onslaught. And the Russians, thankfully, were driven off. So the memory is very strong in Kiev itself, but we've also got that constant undertone of stress and to some extent concern all the time.
Frank, thank you. Your connection isn't great, so I'm very much hoping it will hold out and we can dig deep on some of the military aspects of this war. First of all, I wanted to bring up a map. It's a map by the Institute for the Study of War, and you will, of course, know them. And it's an institute that we at DW News, we follow them with their analysis of what's going on, and they do have good maps, which illustrate what's going on, where the offensives are, where the possible counter-offensives are, what Russia had taken before this war, so before the 24th of February, dating back to 2014 in Crimea. I'm hoping, can we see the map? We've got the map now. So can we zoom in a little bit on that, Michaela? Just try and zoom in a little bit. But they're great. So what I wanted to ask you in particular was that the offensive at the moment from Russia is very much in the east, in the Donbass region. And we know that Luhansk now appears to have been taken. I know it's taken a while, but that appears to have been taken. But Donetsk still has not. But can you just fill us in and tell us exactly, well, as far as you can, what is going on the ground there?
Alex, if you look at that map then, you see the two, or you will have seen the two small circles and a triangle into Russians. That's called a salient. And salients, or bridges, as they're called, are always very tempting for armies to close. It also means if you're in a salient, you're surrounded essentially on 2 out of 3 sides. And
just let me interrupt you 1 second. Can we see that map again? Yeah. Can we just see it while Frank's talking specifically about it? We just bring it up. Yeah. Yes, great. Sorry, carry on. Just because you were explaining it and then we couldn't see it on the screen. So carry on, Frank.
Right. Yeah, so you've got on the right-hand side there, you've got where Luhansk is. Just by the L, or just below the L of Luhansk, you've got a green circle, and above that, another green circle. So if you join those two circles together and look at the red line to the right, you've got a triangle, a bulge, if you like, into Russian lines. At the peak of that triangle is Severodonetsk and its sister city, Lysychansk, which were taken last week after a 2.5-month fight.
Mm-hmm.
So what the Russians are going to try and do now, and there's little doubt about this, there's no genius in this assessment, is join together those two circles there and close that salient off. Now, traditionally, that would mean that what they're trying to do is trap Ukrainian forces within that and surround them. But the Ukrainians obviously knew that was going to happen. They've made arrangements to leave, as it were, and they withdrew in good order last week from Lysychansk, which demonstrates a considerable level of operational skill. So what we're going to see, I think, what we are going to see over the next 2 months is essentially a continuation of that battle in what the Joint Forces Operational Area, or now they call it Luhansk and Donetsk, and the Russians call it Donbass. And what they're going to be going for, just below that top green circle, about 20 kilometers south of there, exactly where the arrow is now, is the city of Sloviansk, and below that is Kramatorsk. Those two cities are heavily fortified. They will certainly be the next target, and the Ukrainians will fight the next battle, and it will take a considerable amount of time. It'll also tell us a lot about how the war will go on after that into the autumn.
And Frank, 2,700 people are listening to you, because I think this explanation is so valuable. And I think I have two questions off of the back of that. Russia took the city of Kherson, and Doruk Kutlu wants to know if the next city, perhaps, or one of the next cities, will be Odessa. I know Odessa, one of the most talked about cities probably during the time of this war. Is this one of the strategic next targets as well?
For the Russians, they would dearly love to take Odessa. It would provide the bridge across to complete their conquest of the Black Sea coast. They will not take Odessa. And the reason for that is that they have to get through Mykolaiv first. They have to defend themselves against what is likely to be a counter-offensive to retake the city of Kherson. Kherson sits essentially to the land that's going to take, or would take, the Russians to Odessa. So that's why Kherson is probably going to be the next battlefield in that zone. Odessa is a huge port. It's traditionally a Russian-speaking city. Nowadays, there's little, or if any, loyalty to the Russians left. And there's a certain resonance for Russians in it. But the most important thing is it's the last port, or major port, in Ukrainian hands. And if they are going to have any hope of remaining a trading nation, they have to hold on to that. And perhaps later on we can discuss how they intend to exploit Odessa. But the answer to the question is the Russians would dearly love Odessa. They're highly unlikely to get near it this year, and much more likely for the Ukrainians to try and push them back and retake the city of Kherson, which guards the approaches to Odessa in that southwest part of Ukraine.
Thank you, Frank. And if you are just joining us, hello, welcome to a new show. We're called News Desk. We are looking this week at Ukraine, and we are looking at various topics to find out who has the strategic edge in that war between Russia and Ukraine. And we are speaking to Frank Lebwich. He's a military expert. He's just been giving us some fascinating information, actually, about what's going on with that war, particularly one of the questions in the chat just now. Please keep your questions coming, by the way. One of the questions was, will Russia next want to take Odessa? And Frank was just explaining that it's going to be very, very difficult for Russia to do that, although that is what they would dearly love to do. Odessa, of course, Frank, very important because it's the port city where all the grain, the sunflower oil, all the produce that Ukraine produces is exported from, and Russia's doing everything it can, it seems, to stop that produce from getting out.
Yes, that's right, Alex. It's the last port out of Ukraine, and that governed the fight recently for Snake Island, which was decided, I think, finally in the Ukrainians' favour just a couple of weeks ago. Snake Island holds the approaches, or rather guards the approaches, the western approaches essentially, to Odessa. The Ukrainians have mined the port of Odessa now, actually, to secure it against attack from the sea, but they know where the mines are, so they control those approaches at the moment.
And just
close approaches to Odessa.
And Frank, just talking there about Snake Island, we can actually see some pictures of Snake Island, actually from a report that I did a couple of months ago, so I know we've got these pictures. But no big deal. But it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's literally 0.5 kilometre long. It's like rocks in the middle of the Black Sea, and yet it became this incredibly important strategic spot, island, for which was originally Ukrainian. Then Russia seemed to get control of it, and now, as you say, they seem to have been kicked off. But quite extraordinary just how this tiny little island managed to cause so much, was the place that they were both fighting over. Hopefully we can see it. So here's a map of where it is. And, so you can see it's just, as you said, Frank, south of Odessa. And if we just keep scrolling, right, here it is. So here's look, there's my name. There's my name.
Maybe, Alex, remind the people, why do we have Snake Island still in our minds? Why is it almost famous?
Yeah, well, because also, we're going to see those pictures that will be coming up. Frank, you could probably tell us better on this, but it was at the very beginning of the war that a big Russian ship came in and said, told the people, the border guards, this is now Russian. And you can see from this stamp here, maybe we can just stop the video there. So this is an illustration of the border guard who basically used very crude language, shall we say, to the Russian ship to say, I can't say the words.
He was asked to surrender, right?
And
he was asked to surrender.
And it was absolutely, no, we're not going to surrender. I mean, he was actually taken, wasn't he, Frank? You fill us in on this. But it's become a bit of a myth and a legend, hasn't it, with them creating this stamp, Ukraine so proud that they wouldn't just hand it over to the Russians.
Yeah, that's right. It's literally iconic, and rightly so for the Ukrainians. They had a team of 13 on the island, and it just happened exactly as you said. I think they're back now. They were returned in a prisoner exchange. The Russians had the island, and the trouble is that the Russians couldn't hold it, especially when the Ukrainians got possession of long-range rocket artillery, which put them really under the cosh. They were also subject for a long time to drone attack. Apparently, the Russian soldiers called these drones the Bayraktars, Turkish-made drones, extremely effective, especially early in the war. They called them chandeliers because they were always hanging over them. And the explosion you just saw there, by the way, I think it was the explosion which Russians landed some special forces, I think, to try and secure some kit. And there was a direct hit on them from one of these Bayraktar drones. So they found that they literally couldn't hold on to the island. As you'll have noticed or seen on the map, it's much closer to Ukrainian territory. Ukrainians can guard the approaches to Snake Island with missiles, with anti-ship missiles, and of course their long-range rocket artillery now. And the Russians literally couldn't hold it. So the Ukrainians took it back. Just after that, by the way, quite interesting. I teach air power for the Royal Air Force in my day job. And the Russians raided Snake Island I suppose you would expect them to do that, with their highest specification bombers, Su Sukhoi 30s, high-end supersonic bombers with precision bombing equipment. They did several runs over the island and managed not only to miss the Ukrainian installations, but miss the island altogether, which in modern warfare would be it's a pretty black mark against them. But I mean, you've got to be pretty brave to be there now if you're Ukrainian. But there we are. They've taken it back, and they're unlikely, I think, to lose it now.
Now, Frank, I want to throw another community question your way.
Just before you do that, can I just say there is actually a comment about Snake Island that's just come up, which I had to mention. I have to put my glasses on to be able to read it. It's from XNXO. The Snake Island story is like a Hollywood story, all fiction. But according to you, then, Frank, it's certainly not fiction.
No, it's not fiction. No. I mean, there is some question about the heroic story at the start and exactly how that happened, but I mean, that's irrelevant, really. The operational sort of toing and froing is entirely how it happened. I don't think there's any dispute about that at all.
Well, certainly that video in the beginning was part of a larger almost propaganda, because it was used definitely to show the resilience that the Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have. So that's something that we're going to talk about in a second. But I want to first of all ask you a couple of, or at least one question from the community. Esvag Geras asks, Russia takes more cities. Do they have the operational capacity to maintain control over the domestic population? How does this strain their military force within the country? So definitely something, the more approach we see from Russia, the more the question arises, can they even hold that ground? Do the people living there actually want the Russians there?
I've not been to any Russian-occupied cities for very obvious reasons. I wouldn't last there very long. However, everybody I speak to, even those, perhaps even most people from those areas, are Russian speakers. That's their first language is Russian, although now they're relearning Ukraine to dream, as it were, in Ukrainian. I was just talking to a young woman the other day from a city called Berdyansk, which is on the south coast. It's just near the ill-fated Mariupol, and she represents the thousands of residents there. Russian would be her first language. She's absolutely no doubt whatsoever. We'll retake that and we'll drive those people away. In due course, we can discuss whether they'll be able to do that. But the determination has got harder and firmer in all the major cities of Ukraine. So just to give you another, I do fully appreciate these are anecdotal, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Ukrainian person or a person in Ukraine who would differ. So one of the first people I met in Ukraine was someone from Kharkiv, a Russian-speaking first language, now relearning Ukrainian, and I asked her, what price would you pay to drive the Russians out of your country? Bearing in mind her brother was in the army, and she said, any price. Any price. I said, would you pay the destruction of Kharkiv again? Kharkiv was flattened in the Second World War. She said, yes, we'll build it up better. And she lived in Kharkiv. And that's the kind of determination you hear all the time from people from all over Ukraine. There's no question about it.
Thanks, Frank. We've got more questions coming up. If you are just joining us, hello. We are News Desk. We're a new show here on with DW News. We are digging in deep, talking about Ukraine, asking who has the strategic edge. This is Marcel. I'm Alex. We have around this table, we have Michaela, who's sort of the fact checker, and we've got Dustin over here, who's like the boss, the producer, and Jonas, who's the man pressing the buttons. And we have our political correspondent, Ben, who's with us throughout. Frank, can I just ask you a little bit about the military situation in Ukraine at the moment? Because we know that on both sides, Russia and Ukraine have had huge losses. Ukraine, I think even President Zelensky saying that they've been losing up to 200 men a day. Russia also losing people. But let's just talk about the military situation, the weapons situation. Where are we with that?
I'll cover the Russian side first. So the Russians have lost roughly a third of their military material. So what we've observed over the last couple of weeks is they're backfilling those losses with old equipment. They're not out of modern equipment. That's not true. There's still 2/3 of their armoured force left. Roughly, perhaps slightly less than that now. Considerably less than that deployed. So what they've been forced to do is go into the old stocks and bring forward very old equipment. They are having problems constructing and building new equipment because of supply chain problems. And actually, before the war, a lot of their production lines, but for financial problems of tanks, were inactive or in serious trouble. So in terms of materiel, the Russians have lost about 825 tanks, of which 600 or so have been destroyed, another couple of hundred captured by the Ukrainians and used against them, another 1,000 or so armoured fighting vehicles, slightly more than that, and of course the soldiers in them. A conservative estimate of Russian deaths about 20 to 30,000. Well, 20,000 would be a conservative estimate, and you can double that for wounded. On the Ukrainian side, yes, they're taking very heavy casualties, maybe even now equal casualties in terms of manpower. They're taking casualties against artillery, mostly. They are suffering from a lack of what's called battlefield mobility, which is armour, so that if you're struck with shell fire, you don't have an armoured vehicle, you're going to get, at the very least, and probably injured or worse. So they're taking heavy casualties from artillery. well known. The is compromised by a lack of ammunition and is being reached in a reasonable scale now by Western equipment, what they need. Nowhere near what they need. And they're probably enough to hold the line at the moment, but no more than that, I would suggest, for the next week or next few weeks.
Now, there's a lot of weapons questions. I would summarize them coming in. One of them being from Steve Real wants to know: there's a lot of talk of making the Ukrainian army NATO standard. That's a big ask. Obviously, how much NATO standard artillery pieces do they really need to hold the line? So, just for the context, maybe a lot of the Ukrainian army used to be Soviet material, and the stuff that's coming from NATO is different material, so soldiers had to be trained on them, and this is also a big ask that Zelensky keeps asking, is basically, give us more, we need more. So getting the Ukrainian army on the NATO standard, how realistic is that in the next coming weeks or months?
Well, not in the next coming weeks. The promised material amounts to about 200 artillery pieces. Now, it has to be said that those are all of them, from the Norwegian M109 self-propelled artillery through the German Panzer howitzers, the French Césars, and above all, the HIMARS systems from the US.
Can you maybe give us context? 200 pieces. Yeah. Is that a lot? Is that a little? For someone who has no idea of war, how much is that?
Yeah. Well, to put it in context, the Russians have about 2,700 pieces. Most of those, though, are not precision artillery. And what the advantage that the NATO standard material gives you is it delivers precision strikes. So to put that, just to illustrate that, your viewers may have seen fields pockmarked with craters, like in the First World War. We've got that down in the Donetsk and Luhansk area over the last couple of months. That's wasted ammunition. Artillery is most effective if it's precise. And the NATO standard artillery, those couple of hundred pieces of one kind, self-propelled or towed artillery, offer that precision. Most Russian tanks now are destroyed by artillery, by precision artillery. And we've seen that. They're identified by drones. They're located. Gunners make the calculations and drop the shells on the target, which are often tanks or other fighting vehicles, or especially now other guns. That's called counter battery. So they're destroying Russian artillery. They'll not do that in the quantity required. Most importantly now, we see the HIMARS systems, that relatively long-range rocket systems, which the Ukrainians have just maybe less than a dozen, anyway, something like that. What we're seeing them do, though, is quite clever. They are focusing on Russian ammunition dumps. And the Russians have located their ammunition dumps in places where you would expect them to be, next to railheads, near the water, exactly where you'd expect to find them. The Ukrainians are striking them. And that consists of something called a mission kill. It means you can have the kit there, but the kit can't conduct the missions if they haven't got the ammunition. Yeah. That's the next issue. It's logistics. Artillery is always a logistics war.
Now, I just want to name a special shout out to Dark Brother and Steve Real for asking these very specific questions. There's another one from Steely, this user's called, and he's asking if Ukraine continues to destroy Russian munition depots at the rate they have recently. That we're going to watch a video of that, right?
Say we've got some footage of that.
We have a question. How will that affect Russian offensive capacity? So if more depots are going to get destroyed, perhaps with these new weapons that we just mentioned, the capacity that the Russians has, is that an impact that's going to maybe change the outcome of the war?
I'm very hesitant to talk about anything that changes the outcome of a war. War is contingent and dynamic. But what those guys are talking about is called battlefield interdiction. And that, by the way, has been the focus of NATO, both air and artillery development over the last 40 or 50 years. It's exactly to do this. It's to stop supplies getting to the front. And you start, of course, doing that by striking your enemy's logistics hubs, ammunition dumps, fuel dumps, basing areas, that kind of thing. And that does exactly what those guys have said, which is to restrict the supply of ammunition to the guns and thereby essentially save Ukrainian lives. The problem is, though,
for me as a question, just for me to understand, the way I pictured a war was usually men versus men. And what you're now explaining is it's much more strategic than that. It's actually that you're targeting the infrastructure, basically, to not have it men versus men anymore. It's more so, if I get you rid of your depots, you don't have any capacity and ammunition. You don't have the capacity to wage war against me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. It's worth remembering that about 70% of casualties in most wars, in most situations, First World War, Second World War, even more recent campaigns, have been dished out by artillery, not by men with guns or tanks. So if you can stop the supply of that feed of shells to the guns, you're doing yourself a very big favour. The challenge, though, from the Ukrainian perspective, is the sheer quantities the Russians have. Millions and millions of shells stored over dozens of years that they can bring forward in huge quantities. So they can destroy dumps. They've made some really impressive strikes, which look a bit like nuclear strikes. And in fact, there are probably hundreds or thousands of tons of ammunition going up. That won't affect the outcome of the war, but it will affect tactical action in the areas where these dumps are. It'll cause big problems for Russian gunners, and that means reducing problems for Ukrainian defenders.
And we have got a video or some video that was on social media with Ukraine military saying that they had destroyed or targeted a Russian ammunition depot, and it had resulted in a massive blast. Hopefully we can see this picture. I'm not quite sure what date that was from. Dustin, do you know what date, when that was?
Yeah, we did get the video recently. I think it was as recent as we saw it, I think, yesterday or the day before.
Yeah. And it was over...
Frank, maybe he's already seen it.
Yeah.
Are we seeing this on the screen right now?
Surely Frank has seen it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can see it.
Maybe some context I can give is like the Ukrainian. What the Ukrainians said is they were hitting this depot of ammunition with the HIMARS system, and that's something that has come up in chat as well. Like I think John R., Peter Badenek, and Duncan Stewart all mentioned this system, and it's like a weapon system that's just shooting further, I guess, than other weapon systems. And maybe if you can go into on how that system is it really deciding the war? Is it really that important?
Hang on a second. Do we have pictures of the ammunition? So we're doing two different things.
Sorry,
let's take a quick look
of the ammunition. So this is that ammunition depot that Ukraine said they destroyed, but Russia in response said, no, it wasn't an ammunition depot. It was storing fertilizer. Right. Is that right? So, yes. And I guess this is always an issue that we're going to get with this war. One side says one thing, the other side says the other. Frank, I don't know if you know anything. Can we just watch that again? It's quite short. But Frank, I don't know if you know anything about this particular target before we start talking about the HIMARS weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe just one of many.
It's one of several, yeah. There have been about half a dozen in the last week, these accidental explosions at fertilizer plants that happen to be near the front and be in exactly the places you would find ammunition dumps. So, the most important one was around Kherson. That was quite recent. In fact, there were two near there, which is on the south coast, and a couple, I think, in the east, in the Donetsk and Luhansk areas. And again, that this is battlefield interdiction. It's stopping the supplies coming forward. And the way you do that is with precision strike. So to come on to the HIMARS business. So HIMARS is it's one of several systems that the West is supplying. The British and the Germans, I think, are supplying half a dozen or so of these. But the much more capable and much more modern system is HIMARS, HIMARS, High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, which the Ukrainians really want a lot more of.
I think we've got pictures. Have we got pictures of those? The HIMARS weapon system?
Yeah, I think we have one of the videos, but
Michaela
is looking at me as if she does not agree. Maybe we don't have a whole list.
We don't have to. Yeah, we've got some video
just so people at home know
it.
What we're talking about. Yeah. Probably many of you do.
Let's take a look at this.
But I could do with seeing it because just to put it into.
Yeah, but I just want to give context. This is a Ukrainian propaganda video of the HIMARS system, so that's not like this is not something that we got from our correspondents. That was just like independently filmed. Yeah. This is Ukrainian propaganda footage of the system that they just got from the United States.
one of the systems that's actually been commented the most by several users, I can't name them all, but definitely HIMARS has been a buzzword in the comments. So
I can
it coming,
name three.
guys.
I can name three. I wrote three names down. John R., Peter Bedenek, and Duncan Stewart. I think all mentioned it.
People feel seen now.
I hope. I want you guys to feel seen.
I mean, just carry on with what you were saying, Frank, about those, because we are running out of time. But just tell us about that system. They're American, right?
Yes, and the advantage is they're precision rocket systems. So the trucks are just a transport device to get them around. The key issue here are the rockets. So they have a range of about 80 kilometers. They can reach really deep behind Russian lines, and they will strike within 5 meters, because they're guided by GPS, 5 meters of where the gunners want them to go. And they'll cause a big mess when they get there. They can there's a number of modes they can work in, but the best mode is simple precision accuracy. And the Ukrainians have been using those with great efficiency over the last couple of weeks in the way we've described. Are they war winners? No. Are they tactically important at that battlefield level? Absolutely they are. So what the Ukrainians want is 100 of these. Artillerymen that I've spoken to in the West say, 100, 200 would be better, but 100 will do. At the moment, they've got around a dozen that we know of, although thankfully now, what we're not hearing all the time are counting systems going into Ukraine and doing Russian intelligence officers' jobs for them. So we don't really know how many there are now, but the number is growing. The constraint, though, just to close down on the HIMARS, is training. They take a while to train, about 3 weeks to train already experienced crews on them, and supply of ammunition. That's the constraint. It's not the will of the Americans to supply them. I think they'll get the systems and the missiles. It's the constraints of training and, of course, supplying that logistics chain, making sure the rockets get to the front in one big bit to be able to fire at the Russians. So we're looking at this becoming a significant piece of weaponry, but not decisive.
Now, one thing that's been discussed, especially in Germany a lot, is the heavy equipment that could be delivered from Germany to Ukraine. Ben, you've been covering German politics a lot recently in the last couple of months. What's the holdup?
Well, it started pretty slow. We remember the 5,000 helmets that Germany wanted to deliver, and it was a very long process. Where are those helmets? It was pretty difficult for them. Then to move from this first speech that Chancellor Scholz gave of the Zeitenwende of this new era, saying we will start sending weapons, we will have this special fund for the Bundeswehr as well, so to put the money into the German military as well, that has been for years abandoned basically. When we look at the status of how the equipment is with the planes, with the helicopters, so moving from the helmets to say we can give more, we can give this Panzerhaubitze that Frank also mentioned, the Panzerhaube, and what he just said, I think that's vital, the training, because many politicians say that these soldiers need to be trained on these new systems before we can even deliver them. And then that's, of course, why Germany is facing a lot of criticism, saying that it is so slow. And the German government even published a list of this is what we are sending, this is what we pledge to send, because there's always a big difference between what you promise and what ends up being sent to Ukraine as well. But to have this counter, also publicity of saying, we are actually helping, we're sending these weapons, we're training these soldiers, we're training Ukrainian soldiers on German soil for the systems that can then be used in Ukraine. It's been a long process, but if we consider how this change of a policy that Germany had for so many years, and from one day to another you had this speech, you were more people also within the government, where we have the three parties, so the pro-business FDP party, the Greens, and the Social Democrats. It's always difficult for them as well to have a common approach when it comes to these weapons. And others saying, you know what, no more weapons for them, we just need to find a dialogue or something. But of course, that's something that you can say when you're not directly involved, when you don't have a border to them. But if you talk to people in Poland, if you talk to people in the Czech Republic and the Baltic states, they will say you have to send the weapons and you have to send them quickly.
Now,
sorry, Ben no, I just wanted to make sure that Frank was still with us.
Yes, I also Frank, the chat loves you, first of all. Can't blame them. There's a lot of good questions coming. A lot of them are kind of looking towards the future. And I know you've said you're quite cautious with predictions, but especially Nana Quardo, Rick Torre, Trivillias, they all want to know, where is this war going? What is something that we can expect? And we had a poll in the beginning of the show that was basically saying, what do you expect Ukraine to look like in a year from now, in a couple of years from now, in a decade from now, or maybe open end, you know?
War, as I said, is entirely contingent. There are billions of variables. However, we can be certain of one thing, that Ukraine is determined to retake the land that it has lost. And this is not just a matter of principle. Right now, strategically, Russia has the edge. There's no question about that. They hold the capability in their hands to render Ukraine a failed state, landlocked, with a very big army and an angry population if this goes on unchanged. So Ukraine has to retake its land, and particularly has to go south. I don't think they're going to be going for the Donetsk and Luhansk area yet. They still have to defend that, of course. That battle is by no means over. In the medium term, we are going to see, the government have announced it, a counterattack to the south. Now, whether that's towards Kherson, they've been making progress down there already, or into Zaporizhia towards Mariupol and Berdyansk, no one knows. There's deception involved, information operations, propaganda, but above all, there's the sheer capability of being able to do that. Now, right now, it would be a real gamble for Ukraine to try that. I don't think they've got the materiel to be able to be sure to break through and hold territory, notwithstanding the wreck that the Russian armed forces are in. I mean, we heard reports last week, they're now recruiting prisoners into their ranks, which it seems to me to be a continuation of an old trope for them, given the mayhem that they caused in the north up here and certainly caused down in Donetsk and Luhansk. But anyway, so they've got manning problems, the Russians. The problem from the Ukrainian perspective is, can they be sure that those offensives will succeed? I suspect they can't be sure of that now. It's a big, big risk. However, if they take Kherson, which is to the west, just to the northwest of Crimea, the way to Crimea lays open if they break through Russian lines there. But they'll want to be sure to be able to do that. And that means they're going to have to wait, or should wait, for new Western tanks, new Western artillery systems, and those brigades to get trained up to replace the losses they've taken. So I think in the medium term, we'll see that offensive from Ukraine, and one hopes it will succeed. How long will it last? It will certainly go on into next year. I don't see any way out of that. Ukraine can't afford to allow a status quo to develop where lines go firm and you have a landlocked, failing state. There's economic imperatives there as well as national ones. So they're going to have to retake that ground. So that's going into next year. I think the Donetsk and Luhansk battle, whilst not decisive, shows the way this is going. If the Russians prevail in that over the next 2 months, and going back to the start of the show, when we looked at those two towns, there is going to be huge fighting in over the next couple of months, and that's Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, which are very heavily defended. If that goes the Ukrainian way, I think that'll tell us the way things are going. The Ukrainians will be able to hold those, they'll hold their line, and that will be as far as the Russians get. If they lose those, the way is open then for Russia to go deeper into Ukraine, and that would be very unfortunate for the country.
So in answer to the question that we asked at the beginning here on News Desk, we're talking about Ukraine in quite some depth, and we've got Frank Ledwidge. He's just about to, sadly, I think, have to disappear off, but he's a military strategist. In answer to our question, who has the strategic edge? Who has the strategic edge at the moment, do you think, Frank?
At the moment, the strategic edges is Russia. In the medium to long term, I think with Ukraine, provided and only provided that the West does what President Zelensky asks and gives them the tools to do the job. If we give them the tools to do the job, they will win this war tactically, and they will provide dish out a strategic defeat to Putin, from which he I suspect, will not recover. But that's conditional on that flow of weapons not continuing, but ramping up, and a step change in that to allow the Ukrainians to retake their land and dish out a strategic defeat, as opposed to the tactical setbacks they've imposed so far.
Frank, thank you so much, Frank, for joining us and for talking to us for so long, in so much detail, so much depth. Clearly very much appreciated in the chat with people asking very, very specific questions. Many, many more that we can ask you, but we have literally run out of time with that. So, Frank, thank you again. And I'm sure that we will be speaking to you in the future. But for now, from Kyiv, thank you very much, Frank Lebwich.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex, and everyone. It's been great to talk to you.
Remarkable, right? I think the last, almost towards the end, what he said was, I'm assuming he said that. Like, disagree with me in the chat if I'm misquoting. Didn't he say that there's a possibility of getting Crimea?
Possibly in the future. In the future, but I mean that has to be some way down.
Somewhere down. For those who don't know, Crimea taken by Russia in 2014, in where some might even say this war originally began. So it's not 2022, it's 2014, where large parts of eastern Ukraine and Crimea were taken by Russia. Crimea is certainly very interesting because of the Black Sea and the nearby ports that it has. So a lot of questions from the chat. People appreciate Frank a lot, so I think that's already great. The first guest online was that good. Well, second guest next to
because the first one didn't work very sadly. But Ben, just with your political background, but also I know that you've been following all this very carefully, the strategic battles as well. What did you make from what Frank was saying there, and particularly about who has the strategic edge at the moment militarily? He seemed to be saying it's Russia at the moment, but could be reversed in the future if Ukraine gets the weapons.
In a long term, and therefore the pledge that G7 countries did during this summit is so important. But if we cannot just look at the G7 as countries that can send weapons, we have to look at other players as well. In Germany, hosting this venue, this summit, as Germany is currently having the G7 presidency, invited 4 other countries that could play a major role. So we have India, we have Senegal, we have South Africa, and we have Indonesia. And if we look at Indonesia, that's especially interesting now, considering the images that we got in Bali, where the G20 foreign ministers met with Lavrov, with the Russian foreign minister, being there with people saying that Vladimir Putin will also attend the summit. Of course, there's pressure on Indonesia to kick Russia out of the group,
wow,
as it happened with the G8 and with the G7. So you see G7 trying to get countries on their side, trying to get them to condemn Russia's war, something that not all of the guests for this summit did. So they abstained when they voted condemning this war in the UN General Assembly. So for them, they have to offer an alternative. They cannot just say, you have to be on our side, you have to support Ukraine, you have to condemn Russia, because many of them have their own interests. And many of them are trying to find alternatives, as Russia with China, for example, with Brazil. We have the BRICS countries of this big group that's trying to find alternatives now that sanctions are hitting the Russian economy. But they have to offer them something as well.
Because we have to just explain that they're also hitting some of those countries if they can't get their grain, they can't get their sunflower oils. I mean, some countries are literally starving and
highly dependent. And that's what I really liked about what Frank said with Odessa, with the harbor, where you have the grain and where you also have the fake news with Russia saying that's part of the sanctions, that this grain cannot leave the ports, cannot leave Ukraine, with many African countries being so dependent. There's a new alliance for global food security that German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock also tried to get many people sitting on a table saying what are the consequences for these countries that are so highly dependent of Ukrainian grain that cannot get to the market. So that is a very, very big problem also in the long term.
So for those who just joined us, we are News Desk, a brand new show actually on DW News. We pick out one topic each week that you guys deeply care about. We go in depth. This is a perhaps 1.5 hour, 2 hour show with great expert. We just had a military intelligence officer who really explained the war in a way that
I think he'd say former.
In a way that I've never really understood war. And we do it together with you guys. So your questions and comments are deeply appreciated. I saw a lot of people, so shout out to everyone who's been involved so far. Over 3,000 people have been watching Frank give us these great answers. So I think this really is a community show by now, huh?
Great. And we have actually got our next guest already already waiting for us. And I want to talk to him because I don't want him to disappear, because he's going to be talking about another side of war, which is the emotional side and how important emotions are in international politics. Simon Koshut, hello, thanks very much for waiting. I know we took a bit of time to get to you. Simon is a professor of international security at Zeppelin University in Germany, and has also been involved in a book called The Power of Emotions in World Politics. And let's just begin there, Simon, and talk about emotion, because this has been a very emotional war. Whatever side you're on, emotions appear to have played a very important role.
Yes, thank you for having me on the show, actually. The emotions are quite crucial in this conflict, as in any violent conflict, indeed. And you can already tell that, even listening to the interviews before me, you can even hear some of that. And it's really the old story that, in war, like the war in Ukraine, that is really lacking a factual basis. It's really hard to verify what is actually happening on the ground. What we see is not necessarily what is happening, and so narratives are incredibly important because they compensate for the lack of information, for the lack of verification, and these political narratives that are very decisive over the outcome of the war are, of course, underpinned by emotions, because they need to be emotional in order to convince people to actually sign up to them.
And talking of emotions and encouraging people to sign up, we've got a video, or not a video, but some pictures of a campaign that Ukraine ran. It was like an ad campaign. I think Banda was the campaign group. Michaela, who is our researcher here, can tell us a bit more about it. But it is of them trying to prove how brave Ukraine is. Michaela, you just fill us in and tell Simon as well. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. So at the beginning of the war, a Kiev-based creative agency pitched this campaign, sort of marketing Ukraine's courage, its braveness, its resilience in the face of the war. And that company is called Banda. And so the government took them up on it, and you might have seen these ads. They're all over the world. They're both at home and abroad. And the idea is really to take the focus away from it being like heroism, being these big grand gestures of having no fear, but very much focused on the day-to-day morale boosting and sort of the like nitty-gritty stuff that helps the war get done. So focusing less on the ghost pilot, for example, in Ukraine, and more on the volunteer efforts, or more on women cooking in the kitchen, or all of these sort of like stories that we've seen out of Ukraine since the war began, as well as, of course, the soldiers on the front lines. So I can show you one example of a banner. Let's see if I can find that. Can we take a look at that? So here, this is an English version. So we have, just this very simple design. Brave country needs a brave you. Bravery is in our DNA. Ukraine, home of the brave. And so they're really marketing this idea that Ukraine's chief cultural export is bravery. And so we can also watch a little Instagram video here. Oh, can we? Let's see. Yeah, so and in this one we have, let's see, it's a short video of, I'll just show you and you can take a watch. Can we see? Yeah, we can see that. Oh, let's do the English version. Here we go. So here it's the campaign is saying, or the sort of tagline of this is, courage has no recipe except acetone, polystyrene, gasoline, and a rag. So referring to Molotov cocktails. So it's they have their own Instagram account. And we've also seen these not just in Ukraine, but also further afield. For example, in Times Square. So this really sort of echoes or sort of drives home this idea. This is in Sweden. In Grand Central Station in New York.
They're all about bravery.
All about bravery. And all over the world. So really sort of driving home this point of, Western support or support. It's not just, it's not just Ukraine's fight, I think is the point of this campaign.
This is something that we've just seen Twitter, we've seen Instagram. That's something that we might just ask Simon. Simon, Landon Hoppel asks, how does social media affect the emotions and beliefs people have on the war? We just saw different ad campaigns teaching people how to make Molotov cocktails on Instagram. What role does social media play here?
Well, it's incredibly important. It's what has been used as propaganda in the past, with posters and leaflets that been, thrown out of airplanes in the past, right? And now it's just thrown out of social media, basically. That's the modern equivalent of that. It's basically psychological warfare in a positive and negative sense. It's trying to create, mobilize your support for your home country, for your own cause, and at the same time legitimize and emphasize the moral righteousness of your cause. It's trying to rally around people to carry on and to continue to support the Ukrainian cause, not to grow fatigue of the war, not to grow tired of the war effort, but to continue to support Ukraine in its effort against Russian aggression.
And we will talk to you, Simon, in a moment about this whole issue of war apathy. But sticking with what you're saying and talking about social media and the campaigns that Michaela was just talking us through, I guess Ukraine has got the perfect leader in President Zelensky. He's always in his military uniform. He's got that warlike presence. And when we had our chat earlier, as you reminded me, of course, he was an actor.
That's right. He's a former actor, and he knows his stuff, right? He knows how to present himself in front of the television cameras and in front of media, and he knows how it works. So what he's trying to do, and he's actually quite successful in what he's doing, is trying to put up a Hollywood-like stunt here in order to really rally around this cause. He's rallying around the street in Kiev, showing how he's still there and how he's engaging with soldiers, engaging with people, and so he's really marketing himself and at the same time Ukraine, which he represents, in a very good light, and that's really helping the Ukrainian cause a great deal. I don't imagine how the Ukrainian cause would have been helped by a less charismatic person, a less media experienced person as he is.
We've got some footage of him actually, so we can just be reminded of what he currently looks like, or what he looked like before. Oh, here we are. Yeah, so there he is at the lectern, so this is what he was like before, of course, when he was an actor, had everyone laughing, a comedian, the joker, the person who everyone just thought, he's just an actor who's somehow become president. And wow, what a transformation from this to this. There he is, in his military outfit, always taking the lead, solemn but in control, showing bravery throughout, I guess. Simon, that's the whole point of this.
That's right. He's impersonating this bravery campaign as that you showed before, right? And you could see that really from day one when the Ukraine war started. He switched from his tie and suit to this olive war gear, right? And he kept going with it. It's really quite remarkable how successful he's been with that.
Now, I want to throw a question to you, but maybe we can all try to answer that one because I think it's quite difficult. We've been throwing this word propaganda around as if everyone understands what exactly propaganda is. And Ali Musafi is asking, what's the difference between propaganda and emotional narrative? And I think it's really difficult because sometimes we all get caught in a bit of propaganda and we simply don't know. Simon, maybe what's your best try at answering this question?
Well, an emotional narrative is it can be anything, right? It can be a movie, it can be a good novel that you read. Without being emotional, you wouldn't read a novel, you wouldn't touch it. But in contrast to that, propaganda always includes an emotional narrative, but it's for a political purpose. Propaganda is always for and about a political purpose. It's trying to achieve a political goal. That's what it's for. And it's using emotional narratives to achieve that goal.
Now, as journalists, we oftentimes faced with propaganda because it's hard to, especially when it comes to states and wars, and there's a press release from a certain country, there's always a fine line between there's a press release and this is a state message.
Yeah.
And if we give more platform to this message, we are part of the propaganda. Ben, you've been obviously covering this war extensively. You've seen so many press releases, videos. How hard is it for you to find this fine line in the middle?
I think the most important part is judging politicians by their action, not by their words. Especially now, it's very easy to make promises and say, I'll do this and I'll do that and I can promise this. But a press release is something that they want you to read. And afterwards you have to check, was this true? Was everything that they promised? When we look back at weapons, for example, deliveries, is Germany actually delivering everything? Of course, there's a security aspect. You will not say we sent this on this train over this, platform. But still is holding them accountable for what they promise. And if they say it will be a long-term support for Ukraine, and you have some countries already saying, well, maybe not that much, maybe we have to change something here. And also when it comes to sanctions, I'm sure we'll speak about sanctions later on, where you say we have to sanction the economy, but then you have this turbine of this Nord Stream 1 pipeline, and it's now there's an annual maintenance, with Canada not being able, well, now it will be able for them, to get this turbine back to Russia, with Ukraine, of course, saying, how is it possible that you give them the money, that they get the income by the gas exports to Germany, because they're afraid, of course. And then on one side, you cannot promise we have this sanctioned, we will hurt the economy, but then it's like we will still make it possible for this turbine to be sent to Russia. And that's what politicians have to be held accountable, because otherwise you will just get the promises, and then you have to see what are they actually doing? Are they following their promises or not?
If you are just joining us, we are News Desk. We're a new show here on YouTube, and we are talking about Ukraine in quite some depth. And we are currently joined by Simon Koshot, who is Professor of International Security at Zeppelin University and has also been involved doing a lot of research about emotion in international politics. And Simon, we were talking about that before, but also with what Ben was just saying there, talking about gas and the emotional side, even in Germany. When you think about it, there is emotion all over this war, isn't there? Wherever you're looking, if it's the German side about what do we do with gas and do we take the hit, or whether it's the Ukrainian side with perhaps them, clearly needing the West, appealing to be the victim, and I guess the Russian side too.
Yes, you can actually see in the current debate about gas and the possible energy shortage that, Russia hasn't stopped delivering gas so far, right? But even the debate about it and just talking about it must be wonderful for Putin, right? Let's just listen to it, how people are getting afraid and playing around with different scenarios. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to instill fear in Western population just by making people think about the worst case without not necessarily actually delivering that worst case, but at least, making people think about worst case scenarios like a nuclear attack, like energy shortage, and so on. And just by doing that, again, he's trying to instill a sense of anxiety and fear among Western population and trying to weaken Western unity when it comes to Ukraine.
And yet, talking about Russia and Putin in particular, of course, he used emotion, didn't he, as one of the big reasons to invade Ukraine in the first place back in February, as a means of reclaiming what he said was Russian land, getting rid of what he called neo-Nazis. So although he's now obviously trying to hurt or split the West over this, he's also used the emotion of victimhood, hasn't he?
Absolutely. That, of course, is addressed to a different audience. That is addressed to the Russian and the Russian living in Ukraine audience and its possible supporters in Belarus and elsewhere. And of course, it's interesting. I had a student look at some of the frames that Putin is using, and it seems like that he's turning things around. He's actually accusing the West of being emotional, and he's, taking his side as being the rational one, the cool and calculated one. He's being in charge of things, and the West being very threatening, imperialist, and again very emotional. But as you rightly said, he's also delivering an emotional message to its own people. Appealing to historical narratives, historical heritage of some self-acclaimed Russian greatness that he's appealing to, and at least promising to deliver again. Right? It's the classic thing of any type of political narrative, right? That populists use here as well. Just creating a problem and then delivering the solution.
Now, another thing, well, you've just talked about different audiences that these messages kind of have. Some of them basically the Russian people, some maybe the Ukrainian civilians, some maybe neither Russian nor Ukrainian. It's actually us, the people in the West. But I wanted to ask, besides all these messages and Instagram videos and social videos, there's real life issues that people now have with fuel shortages, food shortages, prices increasing all over, inflation going up, the euro now being at the same price as the dollar. So how, it does influence us. So it's not just, I see an Instagram video and I think, oh yeah, this really captures me. My life is really influenced by it. So are my emotions. And so is perhaps the willingness to support this war ongoing, and maybe the pressure will rise on Western governments to come to an end, to make a decision, and that might even split up the West.
Yeah, that's the great danger and the great risk that you're rightly referring to, and that's the card that Putin is trying to play right now. The whole support, the Western support for Ukraine, is based on the fact that people are empathizing with the Ukrainian plight. And with their suffering. And as long as that is present, the West will be united and Putin will have no way to go anywhere else. However, as we have seen in Syria, as we have seen elsewhere, the longer a conflict lingers on, the less empathy and the less attention is credited to that conflict. And that is when it gets dangerous. That's when people can get their way. If you look at Syria, Russia has its way in Syria, right? They just passed a resolution which is exactly the one Russia proposed, right? In controlling the checkpoint for food deliveries into northern Syria, and that just went down just like that because there's no real attention to this issue anymore, right? It's a thing that happens in the Security Council. It's not happening in the Western media debate.
So is that, Simon, down to war fatigue, people taking their eye off the ball, getting distracted, or is it because Russia, Putin can afford to play the long game?
I think that's what he's trying to do, actually. If you look at COVID, for example, right? The minute Russia invaded Ukraine, COVID stopped from occurring. It was over. At least in the media. And that's when it was over for real. People didn't really pay attention to it anymore. And the same thing can happen to Ukraine as well. If something else happened in the world, some atrocity, some major issue that people will pay more attention to, the Ukrainian fate will fade in the background. And that would be really bad news for Ukrainians, because that way the Ukrainian conflict Putin might have his way. However, I do think that attention in the West, especially in NATO and EU circles, and not just in the public, is quite alert on this. And I think there's more to that. It's not just domestic constituencies. There's also very hardcore strategic issues at stake that will keep Western allies on alert and hopefully also keep the unity within the West. But we already see in this, my last sentence here, we've already seen in the case of Sweden and Finland joining NATO, and the Turkish opposition to that unity is always very fragile.
Now, Simon, you surely just listened into what Frank, former military intelligence officer, was kind of explaining on the military side and how, the future is looking there with, I would kind of summarize with a big question mark. Could go either way, was basically the message. And Dora Kutlu is asking, do you personally think that emotions may be the deciding factor in winning the war in Ukraine? Is that something that especially when the militarily side is, could go either way, a kind of a flag in the wind. Could maybe the emotional part play not a bigger role, but maybe a deciding role in the next couple of weeks and months?
I think so. I think it is decisive. Of course, the conflict itself will be fought on the ground and will be decided by military means in the end, and hopefully by negotiations eventually. But the emotional side of it, especially the emotional narratives that are being put forward by both sides at this point, will be very decisive in ending this conflict. Because without these, and it's really important which of these emotional narratives will be more successful, right, in convincing the world opinion. We've seen this on the Iraq War, for example. We've seen this elsewhere, how legitimacy and fighting for a just cause in the eyes of world opinion can go a long way, right? In mobilizing support. It's really hard to go against the world public, the world opinion for a long time, and Putin knows this. And so he's very glad that he still can still count on Chinese support, Indian support, Brazilian support, or at least not, open opposition. But if the Western narrative can get those states and other people in the world on its side, and that's of course not just the narrative, but they can also will have to deliver real material benefits in terms of food, in terms of energy, etc. But if the West can succeed in claiming a narrative, and that he's quite successful in it, it's not just promoting Western goals here. The Western narrative is very much based on promoting an international order. Where right is not might, okay, where big states cannot annex and invade smaller states. And I think that's a pretty good narrative, and that can go a long way in convincing others, even Brazil, India, and others, of the right cause here.
So, Simon, does that mean then that you think there is a possibility that Putin, if the West is successful with that Putin could come back to the table, could be desperate to find a way out, obviously that will save his honor, but that there might be some way that he can be persuaded that this war needs to end?
That's exactly what I'm hoping for, because on the battlefield, if you will, it very much looks like a stalemate right now, right? Putin can claim a certain amount and can invade a certain amount of Ukrainian territory, especially in the east. But he has failed and probably will fail to conquer Ukraine proper, okay? Because Western support is so massive right now, and it's actually growing even more massive in the coming days and weeks. So it will depend on. There will be a point where Putin will have to think, do I want to go on with this conflict, where I cannot really win anything, or do I want to go to the negotiation table and secure what I have? And that's, I think, one of the dangers that we will face at some point is the question, are we willing, or is the Ukraine willing to give up territory, Crimea, for example, the eastern territories, in exchange for peace? That is a crucial question, and that will be put on the table at some point for sure. We've seen it in the Balkans, we've seen it elsewhere. It's very unlikely that Putin will just give up territory where Russian troops are staying right now. Okay, and there's no way of removing those troops except for military force. And if the Ukrainians cannot do it, there will be the question at some point, whether it's acceptable to give up territory in order to attain peace. And that would be a way for Putin out to save face, coming home with at least some type of victory. Although I have to say that would be a very, very unfavorable outcome in terms of international law, in terms of European security, and of course for the Ukraine.
So in other words, you're saying it's not what Ukraine would want?
It's certainly not what anyone would want, right? As a German, I wouldn't give up a chunk of land from Germany just for someone who just invaded me, right? I mean, it's completely understandable. It's just what we've seen in the past that once you have boots on the ground, and you're not willing or able to remove those boots from the ground, it's it's very hard to sort of remove them. And that's exactly what Milosevic, for example, did in Bosnia by securing territory for the Bosnian Serbs. He did it with ethnic cleansing. Well, hopefully that's not going to happen in the Ukraine, but that's the kind of strategy that Putin is certainly doing, is trying to get as much territory as possible, and then opt for negotiation for a very highly desirable outcome.
Now, I do have a question, because it kind of leads us into the next sort of field that we're trying to get into, and that's the PR war. From your side, especially from an emotional side, because that's obviously where the PR war is targeted at, who's winning the PR war? Is it Ukraine or is it Russia?
It depends on who you're asking, right? If you look at the Russian people right now, they seem to be still buying what Putin is telling them, at least to a large extent. And that is good news for Putin, of course, because it helps him garner support for his war effort. In the West, so far, he has succeeded only partially. There was this thing about, there is fear about, possible energy shortage, and there is talk about, why not negotiate with Russia? Why not give Putin what he wants and all that kind of stuff? And I've heard people say that. Quite astonishing too, but apparently those fake news that Russia is transporting and promoting in Germany and elsewhere is, sticking to some extent, is resonating with some audiences. But on the whole, I think the Western narrative is much stronger. The Western PR campaign, if you want to call it that, is much more convincing. And I said this before, because it doesn't appeal to national or Western interest, but it appeals to the interests of the world, that it's better to have a world based on international law and ruled by international law than it has a world where the mighty just take whatever they want.
Simon, thank you so much, Simon, for joining us and for talking to us for a pretty long time, actually. We've really kept you chatting. But thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating. Simon Koschut there, Professor of International Security at Zeppelin University, and a big name when it comes down to the importance of emotion in international politics and, of course, in this war in Ukraine. Simon, many, many thanks. We'll let you get back to your evening, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you so much.
Benjamin, Zelensky, being the actor that he is, certainly different to Olaf Scholz, right?
Definitely different. And he really knows how important communication is, how important those pictures are. I really like what we just heard about this Hollywood stunt. I will not say it's always in Hollywood stunt, but he knows how important these symbols are, how important if you have a European flag inside of the Ukrainian parliament, if you have all these leaders going to Kiev. Well, you just mentioned Scholz, he was quite reluctant to go there. He said, I don't want to be one of those leaders who just goes in there for a photo opportunity and then goes back, so I need to offer them something. And one of them who knows that pretty well as well is Boris Johnson. He was not there just once, but walking around with Zelensky, with even meeting locals there, knowing how important it is for them. And he will definitely be remembered in Ukraine differently than in Great Britain and England. So to know how important these signs are, how important the communication is, to talk to people, to actually make them believe what you're saying and not just having a script or being afraid of saying too much or being angry or being arrogant what they push on you. So couldn't be a bigger difference if we compare both leaders.
This is the news desk for anyone who has joined us after an hour and 40 minutes. But there's a lot of people still sticking with us, and we have more coming. So stay tuned.
If that's all right. Are we allowed to have more coming? Is that okay?
Yes, we are allowed to.
We're just checking with the boss.
I'm not sure how I like this title, but I am sure that we are allowed to go longer if we want to. So
okay,
if
great.
we keep it interesting. Actually, I know Michaela has...
interesting. I love that.
If you keep it interesting. You too need to keep it interesting. No, actually, I know Michaela has prepared a couple of user questions that we didn't get to answer because the guests didn't fit or we just weren't able to fit them in. There's just so much activity in the chat. Yeah. Thank you guys for that. And I'm sorry for all the questions we can't answer. It's just so much. But we have tried to pick some of them up So Michaela can go into that and I don't know, explain a couple of the ones that were overlooked.
No, it's
Thanks, Dustin. Over to me. Okay, so here are just a few of the very, very, very many questions that we've gotten in the chat. One commenter is asking who fired the first shell at civilians. And so, we know that the armed conflict began in 2014 in eastern Ukraine when fighting broke out between your Ukrainian military and Russian-backed separatists. But of course, tensions began rising sort of at the end of last year, or months before February, I would say. And, by the end of January, beginning of February, Russia had amassed 100,000 troops on Ukraine's borders. So, of course, then we all know that the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began on February 24th, when Russia announced a special military operation to denazify Ukraine. And then soon after, I think it was within the hour even, Russia began airstrikes across Ukraine, including the capital Kiev, as well as launching a large ground invasion from multiple directions. So I think that's a pretty safe bet on that.
That it was Russia.
That it was Russia.
Pretty clear.
Very clear.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Russia.
Yes.
But
Okay.
one thing I just want to, before you get to the second question, what I found interesting when maybe the first day or first half day kind of went by, there was already videos flying around, and we'll get back into the importance of fake videos in a second, of Russian propaganda basically saying, no, it was our guys in the east getting attacked, so we had to get our people to defend your brothers and sisters in the east. So just kind of like a mental note that I just thought of.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah. So on to who are the winners from the war. So XNXO wants to know, out of all of this, who is making money? There's surely someone making money because weapons are not plucked from trees. That is very true. So according to a recent survey, we're seeing that, I guess no surprise to anybody, fossil fuel firms and their investors are the biggest winners of the war, as we see energy prices surging, oil production measures being expanded, and particularly coal companies and offshore drilling services have done the best, both registering a 42% increase in their market value since the beginning of the war.
Which is why some governments are trying to claw some of that money back and introduce these windfall taxes to make sure that they are getting some of that success from the reason, from the fact that prices are skyrocketing. But that is, I suppose, inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also, just while we're talking about that, and also you were talking about sanctions, Ben, earlier. I mean, we know that there are sanctions on Russian oil, and we've got this whole issue with Russian gas. But in May, for example, we know that Russia sold more oil to China for the first time, I think, in 18 months. And even Saudi Arabia had. So Saudi Arabia had always been up there, and suddenly Russia got back in. Now, I don't know if they'd had to drop their price, possibly, but Russia has not done badly with some of this, despite sanctions, despite what's been talked about. They haven't been the complete losers in this at all, have they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess as long as Europe is sort of within their clutches, or oil, gas-wise, it doesn't seem like...
Trying to find other partners as well that can help you. Today was announced that Moscow, so the Russian president will meet with Iran and with Turkey next week. We have Latin America as well playing an important role. We mentioned Brazil several times, Argentina as well. When it comes to exports of grain, Argentinian president was also part of the G7 summit here in Germany with the German chancellor and the government trying to get them on our side, trying to offer them something. But of course, they have their interests as well, and they will try to see if there are other partners where they can export, where they can import. So very interesting to see all these geopolitical changes with the partnerships, and who's trying to stick to Russia, who's trying to stick to the Western alliance, and who's trying to somehow stand there in the middle without condemning the war, but without supporting Ukraine.
Which countries are the ones who are trying to stand in the middle? Are you talking about India, for example?
I would say India, yeah. For Germany, they had Prime Minister Narendra Modi with his government coming here to try to offer them something, an alternative. But also in India itself, so we have the political situation in there. We had the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, who was there. There was like this Raisina dialogue. It's not easy for them because you have to explain. So one side is these talks on a political level, but then also telling the population, why should we support them? With many countries saying, why are you asking us to support you now that the war is like on your backyard, basically, so right next to you. But what happened when Afghanistan, for example, I really like that we mentioned Syria, a war that's going on for 10, for 11 years. What happened with Afghanistan? What happened with Kabul, with the Taliban? So then you have countries saying, you forgot us, you left us alone, and now you want us to rally behind your cause, and you want us to support Ukraine and condemn Russia. What can we win and what can we lose?
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Michaela. We are really running out of time, but hopefully we've got a little bit of time left just to talk about one extra topic that we did want to include, and Marcel has already mentioned it, and that is the whole PR war and who is winning the propaganda war. And you've got a little...
I'm glad we've covered it in many ways, somewhat with Frank, somewhat with Simon, with Ben, obviously. So I'm glad we covered it for a bit. For those who are now still with us, the 2,600 people still, we are the News Desk. That's a brand new show. Today's our premiere, running always on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Central European Time. And we always pick a topic that you guys care about, go in depth, and together with your questions and comments, we will try to really get into a deep dive, get all the nitty-gritty out, and talk to an amazing experts like we had on today with a former military intelligence officer and a professor who wrote a book or edited a book on emotions in war. And obviously we have Ben here, our political correspondent from the Hauptstadt Bureau. And one thing we wanted to get into, and we kind of did get into, is the PR war. And I've prepared some videos that I will be quizzing Dustin on. I know that you know the video. Ben also does know the video. So for all those waiting for these videos, your time has come.
Finally, the quiz. This was promised to me ages ago and
sorry,
did not happen.
That's how it works, foreshadowing. So the way it works, we show the video first. Then you have a try at deciphering, is this fake, is this real? Maybe take us through your thought process, what kind of cues you see. And then afterwards we reveal. For the guys in the chat, you will also be part of this. 1 means you think this is fake. 2 means you think this is real, right? 1, this is real. 2, this is fake. Did I explain it the other way around? Fine. So
whatever.
It's just right, fake or real, whatever. So let's pull up first video. It's a tweet, actually. And yes, let's see what's happening there.
Can we hear it?
I think the sound is pulled down on your end, Michaela.
But it's dancing.
The sound is less relevant, obviously, for this video. I'll tell you that much. So what you're seeing, Dustin, maybe take us through. Explain what you're seeing.
I see dancing people. They have uniforms on. That's one of the first things I would check. I don't recognize them off the bat. And I think they're standing in like a hall, in like a big area with like a round roof. That might be a hangar of sorts. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm not entirely sure. Can't be entirely sure.
Look what's on the left-hand side.
On the left-hand side, a reporter made
No, further in the back. Maybe that's driving there. You see that?
Oh, it's train. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay, I have it really small. To me, the video is really small. It's a train, so it's like a subway station. Okay, get it.
Okay, well, it actually...
what does the tweet say? That would be my first question.
Yes, we can pull that up in a second. It says... It's very small. Russians dance in preparation for...
Let me go with the audio.
Yeah, maybe play the video again, because the audio actually plays a big role in maybe judging where this is.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds very Russian, the melody and the singing to me.
So with the tweet and the caption, what's your first guess? Fake or real? Guys in the chat,
dancing
same
in
for
preparation for the war. My first guess is by the way, this was my I was in the newsroom when the Ukraine war started, and for a couple of weeks this was something I did a lot. Watch UGC, we called it user generated content. Some video someone took and decide, is it real, is it fake, should we feature it on the news or not. My first guess is it might be fake, actually, I think, because it's just like, I can't imagine, like, so this is what a scenario, right? Like, so this is a Russian subway station, and shortly after the war begins, in preparation for the war, they start dancing. What would be the reason to dance before a war starts? Like, I feel like there was not this amount of I don't think the scenario is realistic, and that's why I would say probably fake. But obviously, the next thing I would look into is like, what subway station could this be? And then I would actually pull up pictures of subway stations, find other versions of this video on the internet, and see, can I nail down the subway station? I'm
just trying to have a look in the chat.
You're smiling like as if it was real.
You've got a lot of twos. What was 2?
2 was fake, I think.
You've got a lot of 2s.
I've got it mixed up, I think, but 2 was fake. But definitely it is fake now.
2.
So a lot of Anne says 2, Prince says 2, GTTUNG says 2, Kalle says 2, Smooth T says 2. So people think this is fake. Michaela, maybe we pull up the reveal where this actually took place, if it was in Russia or not. So what people use in newsrooms is a reverse image search engine. What you do is you take a picture or a video, you plug it in there, and that will basically show you other results of the exact same video material. And we see here, this was actually posted in 2018 in a metro station in Uzbekistan.
Aha.
There we go. So I was right when I said it was fake. Oh my God. I'm a little bit like, oh, thank God. I was like, oh my God, if I guess everything wrong, now it's not as bad. Like, if I guess the other 2 wrong, at least I got one right.
Ben, what was your hunch? Fake or fact?
I also thought it's fake.
Was that because Marcel was just playing it and you thought it's got to be fake?
No, not really. But preparation for the war, and then it was posted on February 14th. It's like...
Yeah, there wasn't very...
they're still not speaking about a war. I mean,
No.
special, as you just mentioned, it's special military operation. So having them dancing there with a train arriving with cameras.
Okay, that one maybe was a bit on the lighter, simpler side. Let's pull up the second video. And again, same game. 1 means it's real. 2 means it's fake. So in the comment again, and Michaela, we just have to pause it at the exact moment. So maybe just exactly here. So... Dustin, again, we want your description of what we're seing. And yeah, I'll just give you a sign when to stop.
There is some jets that are flying overhead. This tree. More jets are flying. And then live broadcast of the war in Ukraine. Hope for world peace is what the account is saying. What the tweet, I think it's tweet says.
Yeah.
Can we go back, Michaela, to the jets and what they look like? This would be a question for Frank, for a military expert, because my first intention is like, I mean, we could now look up what the shapes of planes look like. There is like places to look this stuff up. That's what I would do now. And then the other thing I'm wondering, would they fly in formation like if they were actually in a war situation? I'm not sure. I feel like the formation flight is more getting somewhere, but yeah, like. But I'm not entirely sure about that. Like, I'm speculating a little bit here.
But sometimes, militaries will have a show of strength, and they will fly and show that we're here. We're seeing you guys down there.
I mean, the other thing is, I would definitely translate, at least Google Translate the. I think it was Chinese in the tweet, because I just don't know. Maybe there is a location there. That's the other big interesting thing. So if the location of this tweet would be more on the Russian side of the border, somewhere in Russia, maybe there's a higher chance of them flying formation. But then, is it really them? Is it a live broadcast from the war if it's on the Russian side of the border? I don't think so.
So you're saying?
I can't say it's fake because it might be planes are flying above, but it's incorrect. Like, I don't think they were in Ukraine when they were filmed. So maybe fake. I guess. Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, I'm with Justin.
Okay, the chat is undecided. A lot of ones.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of twos.
There are a lot of twos, and there's
Gustavo.
I was just going to say.
Yes.
That's who
maybe
I
what Gustavo is saying. What is he saying?
Gustavo says that's a 9th of May celebration in Russia. There's a bomber there. Is Gustavo right?
Gustavo knows
his stuff. Tell us. Play the rest of the video, perhaps.
Let's take a look.
Close,
Gustavo. This is a military parade in the north of Moscow from the 4th of May, at least that's when the video was posted, in 2010. So clearly...
2020, I think it said.
2020, sorry, 2020. So clearly a couple of months at least before the invasion of Ukraine, the latest invasion of
and
Ukraine.
2 years.
Ooh, Gustavo, I would be interested if you want to...
Well, yeah, but... there was an invasion in 2014, so that's why.
if Gustavo wants to share in the chat what kind of bomber he spotted, I would be interested in that. I would want to know, like, is he?
Can you do that, Gustavo?
Yeah, if he wants to share it, like, if he knows what types of.
And then also
I'll have a look at the moment after the next video. I'll look at the chat.
Why am I showing these videos? Is basically there's so much user-generated content going around, and especially on TikTok, I've kind of caught myself almost of seeing a video, not thinking too much about it and liking it, sometimes sharing it. I know that on WhatsApp, a lot of videos are just being forwarded and we tend to just believe stuff that we see. The message here is we need to be wary because these are two videos that I might have just believed because of, they're on my Twitter timeline. I see them, click, retweet, or maybe just something, this is something to watch. But deep down, they all have a message, right? The first one had this, Russian soldiers are quite happy. We can celebrate, we can have parties, we can invade Ukraine, doesn't really bother us. The second one is basically showing strength, Russian military, we're here, we have jets, we can bomb whoever we want to bomb. That's the second video. And maybe now the third video, again, same play. Last one, I promise you that one. 1, if it's real, 2, if it's a fake. Dustin, this will be your big challenge. It's in German even.
Wow, okay.
There was a German TikTok video and it says Anschlag auf die Ukraine, 23.02.2022, which means attack on Ukraine, 23rd of February 2022. Yes, let's pause the video here. That's as much as everyone gets to see.
Can I see it again?
What are we saying?
The beginning. Is it audio?
No.
No audio.
There's no audio.
Lots of ones. Lots of ones.
Okay, so
in the
I have to
chat.
say, if I would go by in the video frame by frame, I think I would need to go through it frame by frame to see if there was like some kind of so it's 23rd of February.
Yeah, so the beginning of
the war. So that's why I'm thinking it was probably it would probably be a rocket, and then I would like to go through it frame by frame and look if we can see the rocket, check if we can see the rocket. The other thing I'm wondering about is who would film that, right? Like, what's the scenario like? So you're filming a building, nothing is happening, and then, why would you film that? And then suddenly there's an explosion. Can we go to the beginning of the video again, like the first frame?
Dustin's really getting into this. I love it.
But
the chat is as well. The chat is
okay,
as well.
there's already
super
smoke.
into this.
There's already smoke coming from that building. Okay, well then you might film it. Actually, I see that. Okay.
Okay, but maybe let's stay in that frame because I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
What else can we see? Maybe just.
I mean, the other thing the first thing I would check is because that's a big. So if you want to check if these videos are false or correct, a big thing you can check in the beginning is quite easy to check. That is the weather. Was it sunny on the 23rd? Like, if it wasn't sunny in Ukraine on the 23rd, it's fake. And that's like a quick, easy thing to check.
That's a very good.
I'm wondering if we can.
He's close,
He's
isn't
good.
he?
He's good. He's not bad.
Because just go back to that. Sorry, just go back to
check that, please.
Go back.
Oh no, she needs to show the video.
But also, you said. I mean, I have.
Don't spoil it too much.
I'm not. Okay, I won't say. Zip. But that's a good point.
It's a good point.
I'd just say it's a good point that Dustin makes.
Ben?
Look at the weather.
I would also try to go to the number plates. There are 2 cars down there. The other ones are too far away to zoom in. But I would definitely also do that.
And okay, number plates, good cue. Always helps to kind of take location tags, anything you
or
find.
Or advertisement or something, a bus driving by, and that's
does the language scene somewhere displayed match where the audio is supposed to come from? The audio, that's why I took it out actually. The chat, very undecided. A lot of ones. A lot of people think this is real. A lot of people think this is fake.
I'm really trying to be quick about the weather here. No, I'm sorry. Now I'm getting an ad on the website that I'm trying to pull up.
Oh my
Well, we'll make it short.
Michaela,
maybe show the rest of the video. This has been fun.
Let's just put it from here.
So big explosion. I would have trusted that probably. If that would have been on my timeline, I would have liked it.
Yeah. It's just...
Yeah. So weather was a good cue. Basically, what the video is saying, we need to check if in the midst of February in Ukraine, in deepest winter, there's greenery like this. And then the video was taken from our DW fact-checker team, actually, put in a reverse image search and turned out to be a Siberian gas station we saw last summer that went up in the air. So you definitely see very difficult to decipher, especially the last one. Very hard to maybe make sense of these videos,
although
right?
Although in a way, the last one, now we're thinking about the weather, and we remember it's February and it's Ukraine. It was probably the easiest. But it's like, you've got to think in that way, haven't you? That's
what Rick Mentor says. Too green for 23rd of February 2022.
Exactly.
So very much makes a lot of sense. I want to actually try for the community for us as journalists, Dustin, you've spent a lot of time on this, to maybe formulate 3 tips we could give them. When they stumble across videos online, how should they go about these things? I'll give each of you a turn.
We do have to be quick.
Yeah, we're gonna do it quick. Dustin, what's your one tip for the community?
Oh, the biggest one, the source. Check who posted it. Like if it's someone like random account, lots of numbers and like random flags in there. Maybe try searching for one of the things in there and like find out if the video comes up somewhere else. But if it doesn't come up with any good source, don't trust it, is what I would say. This is what we are for, guys, right? Like that's why we are journalists. Like we try to find this stuff out and then post about it. And if you can find it in any outlet that you trust, check that outlet. If they have the video, it's probably true, or at least they can give you some context on it.
Ben?
I think emotions are really important. We spoke about them with the expert. That's what the videos are there for. You have 20, 15 seconds. You have an instant reaction. If it's anger, if it's fear, if you're really happy about it, that you share it. So be really careful about that. Try to, if you see a video in a rational way, pause before you tweet. Be sure, as Dustin said, the source, and then share it or continue. There are many fact page, also web page that just fact information, fact it, and look at videos, look at pictures, and maybe they already fact checked it. So check those pages again.
That's really interesting that you bring up emotions, because that's completely right.
And that's how it works.
That
make you share it. And if you feel something, and it's like feeling it instantly, and you see the video, and it doesn't matter what happens inside you, you just share it because you want other people to have similar emotions as well and then react to it. That's how social media works.
My greatest tip that I surely didn't know about, because I at the time wasn't in journalism, was there's a thing called reverse image engines, a reverse image search. So I just posted that in the chat. One of them is Google Images. One of them is actually called TinEye. So what you can do is just you take a screenshot of a video, of a picture, whatever, you upload it there, and that will show you other results of that picture or video. And there you can oftentimes actually find videos that have been posted years ago, and they just pull them up. They pull them up from different wars. That's stuff that we've seen. We've seen stuff from Crimea, from Chechnya war, from the Syrian war.
And it still works.
And it still works.
You can post it again with any conflict. That's incredible about it. And so easy. That's the problem with fake news. You can share it, and when you have millions of people seeing a video, then doing a fact check and saying that's not true, and then actually sending something out.
And just very quickly, because we do have to end soon, we did ask Gustavo Palos how he knew in your second video about the jets. Why did he think that it was to do with the parade? And he has replied, and he said, I'm going to get this wrong, 160 or 222. It's the one in the middle with four jets surrounding it wouldn't be flying in formation on enemy territory. That was the key bit. So he obviously knows his stuff. Thanks very much for that, Gustavo. Thanks very much for answering. Thank you, everyone. It's been brilliant. It's gone so quickly. I can't believe it's 2 hours. We said we'll get to 1.5 and we could still keep talking. But don't worry, we won't. We won't keep talking. Thank you very, very much. This has been News Desk. It's been our first show. and we've been talking about Ukraine, and we've been digging deep into Ukraine and asking who has the strategic edge there. So we've talked about the military, and we spoke to our expert who's actually in Kyiv at the moment, and he was talking about the situation on the ground there and where he sees that war going. We talked about emotions in war, and we talked about possible war fatigue, and then we've just been talking now about the propaganda war. And Marcel has so entertainingly, is that even a word? I don't even know if that exists, but in a very entertaining manner showed us how important it is for us to know where these videos are coming from, and how can we trust this source, and how easy it is to be misled and to think it's must be true, and then perhaps it's too emotional, we're too emotional, we've tweeted it out and it's not, and it needs to be fact checked. So that's brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Marcel.
We were unsure if this is actually good, the video part, but you actually, the community, you made it great, because your engagement, your questions, your comments made this show a show. Otherwise it just would have been a talk or a podcast or something. So I think the concept really worked, and I want to thank you guys. But there's more to come. That was, I think, really good 2 hours. But if you want to see more of DW News, if you need more background info, check the rest of the DW News YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram, because there's way more knowledge out there that we didn't include in this week's news desk. Yeah, and as I said, we are a news show. We'd love to hear from you. You are the show. You are the community. Please give us some feedback. Let us know what you enjoyed, and we will really take it on board and use it for how we structure the next shows as well. But we must just say big thank you, not only to you, but also to the team around us here who've been here throughout this whole 2 hours. Dustin wants to say something.
I just want to say we need to go through the table one by one, because what you guys don't know, or maybe have seen in the beginning, I don't know, is that we had a wide shot of this whole table, so a shot where you can see all of the table, but the camera has died. So that's why we will be saying goodbye, going shot by shot around the camera.
The camera has died.
So goodbye from me, goodbye from Jonas, our technician.
Okay, so hang on. So Jonas, thank you very much. And Dustin, he's the boss, as we keep telling you. Then
thanks to Michaela and Ben. Michaela, our research producer, and Ben, our political correspondent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. That was amazing.
Thanks for the invitation.
And then, obviously, thanks, Alex, for having time.
And thanks, Marcel. And what a team. And thank you. It's been brilliant. And, News Desk will be back at the same time next week. And
I will see you next week, actually.
And look, there are the times, because I was going to say at 100 hours Berlin time. Oh, it's gone again. It's too quick. I really want to be able to learn what the times are at 8 o'clock in Berlin. What is it in the rest of the world? Can we get it back? Anyway.
1 second, Marcel.
Hang on. We've got to get this up before we leave. There it is. There it is.
There's a questionnaire coming up, and I would really love you guys to fill it out for more intel, for more input. So maybe next show will look slightly different, but it will be different because you guys changed it.
Thank you. See you soon.